Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third edition of our Africa REMI Virtual Policy Dialogue series, where we will be discussing the role that special economic zones serve as potent industrial policy tools used to bolster the manufacturing of renewable energy technologies. My name is Lola Abiola, and I'll be your host and moderator for this webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. First, this session will be recorded, and we'll share the recording along with any materials discussed today on the SE4All website. Throughout the webinar, you can submit your questions using the Q&A feature. We'll do our best to address as many questions as we can during the Q&A segment. Our webinar today will run for about 90 minutes, and we have a set of dynamic and accomplished speakers prepared to share their insights on the subject matter. Without further ado, I would like to welcome and introduce the CEO and Special Representative to the UN Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All and Co-Chair of UN Energy, Mrs. Damnola Ogunbiyi, to give her opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Lolade. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies who are joining us today, I'd like to welcome you to the third webinar in the African Renewable Energy Manufacturing Initiative Policy Dialogue Series. We at Sustainable Energy for All are excited to host today's webinar, which highlights the critical role the special economic zones play in enabling the scale-up of renewable energy manufacturing across Africa. We're also excited to organize this webinar, which highlights how we're going to exactly grow from this critical role. What does Africa have to do to make sure that it is that place that people go when they think about manufacturing critical minerals for green industrial growth? One of the key things that we will spotlight today is the ambitious efforts that governments and industry stakeholders in the Global South have taken to support green industrialization. The topic of green value chains sits at the heart of developing countries' priorities on advancing energy access and security, climate action, and industrialization. As energy transition ambitions grow and the adoption of renewable energy expands, many Global South countries' reliance on imports of modules, batteries, electric vehicles, and auxiliary components will only rise. This is despite many of the critical mineral resources used in manufacturing phase emerging from the Global South. This is a lost socioeconomic opportunity, and governments increasingly recognize that energy transition must go hand in hand with the efforts to build domestic renewable energy manufacturing capacity and to reduce the import dependency and drive industrialization and, of course, job creation. At Sustainable Energy for All, we are supporting governments and key stakeholders through the African Renewable Energy Manufacturing Initiative to drive policy and regulatory changes, facilitate investment, strengthen skilling and capacity building, and support local enterprises to catalyze local manufacturing of solar modules, batteries, and electric vehicles. Today's webinar is timely as countries increasingly turn to special economic zones as an industrial policy tool to catalyze investments in renewable energy manufacturing. Beyond the headlines, important actionable lessons are emerging from regional experiences and partnership opportunities for implementation. Today, we provide an opportunity to meet leaders from renewable energy manufacturing enterprises, infrastructure developers, financing institutions, and development partners from across the region, including Africa and Asia, to share their practical experiences and answer practical questions on business, financing models, market access, trade policy design, and attracting manufacturers at scale. It is great to see on the panel today SEZ experiences from South Africa, Indonesia, Nigeria, India, as well as key ecosystem enablers, including leadership from IFC, AfriExim, InfraCorp, UNIDO, Arise, and others, and I'm confident that these discussions will inform decision makers on socioeconomic zones development for advancing renewable energy manufacturing across the global south. Sustainable Energy for All, through its program, stands ready to support governments in all the efforts to strengthen the green value chain. Recently, we announced a new partnership to set up a council for critical mineral development in the global south as a platform to facilitate South-South collaboration and South country level action to develop inclusive green value chains from minerals to processing and refinery and finally to manufacturing. I look forward to the outcomes of this discussion and deeper engagement with all of you on the work we're already doing and how we can support your work going forward. Thank you everyone for listening, and I hope you have an amazing seminar. Back to you, Lolade.
Thank you very much, Damlola, for your remarks and for setting the scene. As you rightly noted, many governments have demonstrated their ambition to develop their local renewable energy manufacturing capabilities and utilize the energy transition as an opportunity to usher in a new era of prosperity for their economies. And Nigeria is a prime example, having launched its energy transition plan in 2022 and more recently announced its plans to develop a green industrial zone. Unfortunately, today we do not have the Nigeria Special Presidential Envoy on Climate Action with us. However, it is my pleasure to provide some context on Project Evergreen City, which is positioned to become Nigeria's first green industrial zone. The zone shall combine the use of net zero technologies for clean energy, disaster resilient infrastructure, and the integration of supply chains across several renewable energy technologies, such as solar PV, lithium batteries, and electric mobility. The development of Evergreen City is in line with the Nigerian government's commitment to develop a vibrant green economy to serve its domestic market and that of the region. And this is consistent with its net zero ambition and support for the global effort to address the existential crisis of climate change. The Office of the Presidential Special Envoy on Climate Action is vested with oversight and leadership of Evergreen City, while Infrastructure Corporation of Nigeria, InfraCorp, is the mandated lead arranger and developer. The zone aims to attract domestic and international companies to scale up the renewable energy manufacturing sector and create a diverse industrial ecosystem that fosters innovation and development of adjacent industries required to ensure the long-term sustainability of renewable energy manufacturing in Nigeria. Now, turning aspiration and ambition into actionable steps and palpable impact is one of SE4All's key strengths. Our panelists here today bring with them an abundance of hands-on experience and knowledge that we hope to tap into to highlight opportunities for invaluable learnings and potential collaboration. And now we shall move on to the panel session of the webinar. Today, we are privileged to have an esteemed panel with us to guide us through the different facets of SEZ development, global experiences, and emerging lessons as governments scale efforts to build local green manufacturing industries. Our panelists are, in no particular order, Mrs. Dalia Khalifa, Regional Director for Central and Anglophone West Africa at the IFC. Mr. Ashish Sharma, President, Strategic Growth at Wari Solar, India. Mr. Jasveer Singh, Cluster Director and Head of SEZ Development Function at Arise Integrated Industrial Platforms. Dr. Lazarus Angbazo, CEO at InfraCorp. Mr. Matthew Cullinan, CEO of Atlantis Green Tech Special Economic Zone, South Africa. Professor Purwanto, National Policy Expert at the Global Eco-Industrial Parks Policy Program in Indonesia. And finally, Mr. Zito Alfayo, Head of Project Preparation at Africa Export-Import Bank. You're all very welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. So to set the stage for our discussion, let's consider SEZs as drivers of economic development, accelerating activity across multiple sectors through financial mobilization and significant impacts on policy adoption. I'll start off with you, Dalia. So the IFC has long supported developing countries with its expertise in various policies. How can regional markets and trade policies be leveraged to aggregate demand and build competitive renewable energy manufacturing sectors? Over to you.
Thank you very much for having me here this morning or this afternoon. Welcome to everybody. Thank you, Damilola, and all colleagues on the panel for this. It's a very important topic, and it's a topic that IFC has many years and a broad set of expertise that it brings to bear. We've been supporting special economic zones across the world. Over in recent years, in particular in Africa, we've seen that SEZs have come to play an important role in industrial policy in a country. And when countries have many objectives that they are trying to address, whether it be job creation, increasing economic development, bringing in foreign investment, meeting climate challenges, meeting energy challenges, special economic zones provide a special one solution, if you will, to all of those concerns and all of those challenges. In fact, it turns those challenges into opportunities. So a special economic zone allows you to put in place policies which encourage investment, both domestic investment, but also foreign direct investment. It enables you to target particular sectors if that's where the comparative advantage is in a region of a country or in an economy, and enables you to put in place policies that will enable the kinds of outcomes you're looking for. So it's not that you're trying to look for, tax incentives for particular investors, although that may be one carrot that you're providing, but more it's in attempting to see, okay, how can we make sure that we are generating the economic returns in a way that is sustainable to the environment, in a way that can mitigate any potential downsides. And that's where we're seeing in a lot of the kinds of special economic zones that are coming across the continent, and especially in Nigeria, where we're seeing a lot of that kind of activity as well. Now, the government's policy in terms of generating energy using special economic zones as a tool is very encouraging. And we have been speaking with the government, we've been speaking with investors to see how IFC can bring its knowledge and its expertise and its financing to bear to support that kind of a outcome.
Thank you very much, Dalia. And I liked when you spoke about sort of SEZs being a tool to turn challenges into opportunities, because at the end of the day, despite the climate issues that we're facing, we are looking to see how can we turn those challenges into opportunities. And thank you very much for your insights and for your remarks. So I'll turn over to you, Mr. Alfayo. So Afreximbank has been at the forefront of financing SEZs across the continent, including the ones in DRC and Zambia, as well as having collaborations with UNECA and Arise LLP. So, Mr. Alfayo, building the infrastructure and regulatory framework of the SEZ is one part of the puzzle. What measures are needed to attract manufacturers and investors?
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to extend my gratitude to the organizers for inviting both myself and the African Export-Import Bank to participate at this particular event. So I'll begin by first stating that special economic zones, they present a distinctive opportunity for fostering economic growth and development. We at Afreximbank, we firmly believe that green special economic zones are innovative tools the continent can utilize to expedite on its industrial infrastructure development. Within the African context, green special economic zones can catalyze labor-intensive industrialization and value-added agro-processing. This will create jobs initially at an unskilled level, increase domestic revenue through higher value product production, reduce vulnerability to external economic shocks by diversifying the economy and decreasing resilience on primary commodities. For this particular reason, Afreximbank, as part of its strategy, has prioritized the emergence of industrial parks or special economic zones under its sixth strategic plan, We actively pursue strategies aligned with the two key strategic pillars. That's the promotion of intra-African trade and the AfCFTA implementation, and the promotion of industrialization and export development. Our primary goal is to diversify and accelerate the transformation of Africa's trade from reliance on primary commodities towards encouraging domestic production for local consumption and export. Turning to what we've done so far in the industrial parks, we're happy to highlight that Afreximbank is arguably one of the most active players in this particular sector. To date, the bank has disbursed about $1.4 billion to facilitate the development of in the park and out of the park infrastructure. And this investment has been deployed in Gabon, Benin, Togo, and Chad. We're also advancing pipeline deals of over $2 billion in Cote d'Ivoire, Malawi, Botswana, Kenya, DRC, Zambia, Rwanda, and Nigeria. We believe the creation of these parks and zones is a pivotal move towards transforming Africa's trade from a focus on raw material exports to a broader industrial and export diversification strategy. Through the industrial parks that we're supporting, we expect to unlock energy savings of at least 40%, and this is achieved through deployment of solar street lamps, solar rooftops, and also green buildings. We expect to save water savings of about 50% from what is normally the base case level. We also expect to embrace and ensure that there will be some carbon sequestration, because these SEZs promote tree planting initiatives, including planting trees on roadsides and parking areas, and we make this a mandatory requirement. Turning to some of the key measures that we can support, that ought to be in place in order to support some of these renewable energy manufacturing entities. First and foremost is to ensure that we have fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. So to make the SEZ more attractive to investors, we expect to see benefits such as competitive tax breaks, such as reduced corporate taxes, tax holidays, or even import duty exemptions. Additionally, we expect to provide financial incentives such as grants or subsidies that will help offset the initial costs of setting up a business within the zone. These measures can significantly reduce the financial burden on businesses and encourage investment. In addition, we expect streamlined regulatory processes to reduce on bureaucratic hurdles and save time for businesses. We need to simplify and expedite on the procedures such as business registration, permits, and licensing. Additionally, we seek to establish one-stop shop centers whereby businesses can access all necessary regulatory requirements that will help streamline the process and minimize delays in setting up shop. Our competitive operating costs. To maintain a competitive business environment within the SEZ, we expect to see carefully managed land prices, utility rates, and other operational costs. This strategy can help the SEZ to stand out as a cost-effective location for manufacturing and other operations. We also expect to see policies that will support a skilled workforce, or measures to support a skilled workforce. This entails to invest in vocational training programs to develop a skilled workforce tailored to manufacturing industries that can enhance the appeal of the SEZ to investors. This will entail additionally partnering with universities and research institutions to attract and retain talented individuals and foster a vibrant and innovative ecosystem within the SEZ. We also expect to ensure that we have reliable and affordable supply of raw materials to the renewable energy manufacturing entities. And this is through ensuring a stable and cost-effective supply of these raw materials. The full supply chain has to be mapped out. We expect the SEZs can attract and retain tenants, foster economic growth, and contribute to the overall development of the region. Furthermore, a secure supply of raw materials can help to reduce the risk of supply chain disruptions and enhance competitiveness to our SEZ tenants in both domestic and international markets. We also expect to see measures relating to market access and trade facilitation. This will ensure businesses have easy access to both domestic and international markets, improve logistics infrastructure, and implement trade facilitation measures. By reducing custom barriers and enhancing supply chain efficiency, you can create a more favorable environment for businesses to import and export goods, ultimately boosting their competitiveness and profitability. One last key measure that we typically expect is the investment promotion and marketing. To attract investors to the SEZ, We need to see and implement targeted marketing campaigns and participate in international trade shows to showcase the zone's benefits and opportunities. Additionally, we need to build strong relationships with global business networks and investment promotion agencies to increase awareness and facilitate connections with potential investors. These efforts will help position the SEZ as a desirable location for businesses seeking to expand their operation. By adopting these measures, SEZs can create a compelling value proposition and establish an appealing environment for manufacturers and investors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alfaro, for your very thorough and detailed remarks. I think a lot of what you had mentioned is extremely, important and serve as key anchors and factors for those considering to developing special economic zones. Thank you so much. So I'd like to move on now to emphasize the role of private sector in SEZ development and the importance of robust infrastructure, as these elements are crucial for attracting investments and ensuring the success of SEZs. So I'll move on to Mr. Ashish Sharma from Wari Solar. So I hope Mr. Ashish is with us today. Okay.
No, he's not there. We can move to Mr. Jasveer.
Okay. So hopefully he'll join us later on during the webinar. So on to Mr. Jasveer. Arise LLP has extensive experience in designing and developing SEZs and industrial zones across Africa, such as those in Benin, Gabon, and Togo, with several more in the pipeline. Based on your experience, building industrial ecosystems, what are the key success factors that governments and national investment facilitation agencies should consider as countries look to develop SEZs for renewable energy manufacturing? Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for inviting me for this webinar. And I'll just give a small background of Arise. So Arise has close to about 10 projects. We are developing close to about 10 special economic zones in our industrial platforms in Africa. And we have close to about $2 billion invested in this, in development of the entire ecosystem. We have, a zone running in, small size zones running in like Togo, where we have close to about 5,000 people, working. We have medium size like in Gabon, where we have 10,000, people working. And we have big ones like we're developing in Benin, where already 10,000 are there. And by the next year, same time, we'll have close to about 25,000 people working. So with this experience, I can say when you ask on the critical things that the government need to pay attention to. See, this webinar is too short, so there are 23 aspects that we need to take care of it. I have personal, experience of developing close to about, 35 SEZs and back in India as well as in Africa. And within Arise, like these 10 operating projects that we have. On the basis of that, I can say that when you're talking about development, so I'll just list three, I'll not list all. When you're talking about development, then that's not the right way. You need to talk about development, operation, and the skill development. There are three parts to it. And see, developing infrastructure is not a big deal. Big deal is to operate attract investment and, pay back your loans, whatever money you have borrowed. So that is where we need to look at the holistic approach. Okay. And I came across a SEZ where they had invested about a $5 million on the concept development and the initial marketing. So, we need to look at the cost, because I was worried for that SEZ, because if you put that cost, that whole loading will be on the land that they will lease. And at the end of the day, it is the investor who has to pay that money. So, that cost would be so huge that no investor will come and lease the land, because they cannot pay that rental. And if you are going to lease out at a lesser price, then you cannot pay back your loans. So what I want to say is you need to have a holistic approach on the entire cost, on the development, the operations, as well as skill developing. Okay. And then we need to have the holistic approach on the cost as well. So second is when, on the human touch, because more than 50% of the investor would be from outside Africa. I'm talking about Africa because last 10 years, 15 years, I've been active in Africa. So I see a lot of investment promotion companies, government, agencies going to international market doing 3 day, 5 day road shows, and they come back. Sorry, they cannot make that connect with the investor and attract them. You need to have a human connect. Human connect can be at three levels. One, of course, when you're trying to promote your zone, okay, there you need to at least make the presentation in their local language. Okay, you need to have someone from the country in your team where you are making the presentation. You should have a small office in that country. Then that will give the human connect at the time of marketing. Second, at the time when the onboarding is there, you need to have a one-stop solution where all the approvals happen, and you need to appoint a dedicated account manager. Okay, thirdly, I'll say when the industry starts operating, you need to take care of the aftercare services, or a customer care representative has to be linked to them. Third, I'll quote five examples. The third one is the ecosystem approach, where from the raw material up to the entire marketing of the finished product, we need to look at the entire value chain and look where is an issue and try to find a solution to that problem wherever there's a problem. Okay, so that will encourage the ecosystem growth. And when you're talking about renewable, then we need to look at specialized quality infrastructure like testing facilities, certification. Again, here I like to quote my experience from Gabon. We brought an investor to set up the first pharma company in Gabon, and he could not when after everything was done, he could not operate for 9 months because then there was no certification system. There was no agency which could certify the GMP lab that they had. So they had to go for international agency certifying. So very important, when we talk about ecosystem approach, we talk about specialized quality infrastructure. Then if you talk about renewable, say for example, if you want to put EV bikes, we have a plant in Benin coming for EV bike. We are going to produce 1,000 bikes daily. Now, 1,000 bikes, when the bike is first being sold, you need to charge the battery first. Each day you need about 4 megawatt of electricity. And if you want to be role model in renewable energy, you need to produce your energy also from renewable energy, sources. So if I want to put a solar system, solar network, then I need to put a smart grid, which can, when this is not in use, I can transfer that power to the government infrastructure and at least make money from that. Fourth of the fifth, I would say access to finance. When you're developing a either you don't look at, see, like I said, most of the investors are from outside Africa. They do not have any business history. When they are investing in Africa, they get the approvals from their respective governments to invest on the capex side. But what about the opex? Because they do not have a banking history, they are not able to access working capital. Today, we need to see how we can make this path possible. And here, I want to thank AfriExim because we have come up with ATDC, where together we have pooled our resources with AfriExim to create $100 million kitty for all those who want to access working capital in Africa for processing. And at the same time, we need to look at green financing. If you're talking about renewable, energy, we need to look at how do we develop the venture capital and private equity markets. And lastly, but not the least, like I said, out of 23, I'm just selecting 5 for you. So the fifth one is the sustainability. So Arise last year, we got the Reuters 2023, Sustainability Pioneer Award. And we are very strong on sustainability. As a result, we are able to attract to our zone investors from US and Europe. And when I talk about sustainability, we need to look at green certification. Our buildings in the zone are LEED certified. We are talking about lower carbon footprint. We are talking about waste management, recycling. All our projects are environmentally, we have all environment impact assessment properly done. And also we are promoting industrial symbiosis and circularity. So what is industrial symbiosis? Where the raw material of one industry, the finished product of one industry becomes the raw material of the other. So that whole network, that is industrial symbiosis. And we are also promoting circularity at the zone level, not at the individual unit level. At the zone level, a waste of one becomes the raw material for the other. So by this, we are able to, if we have been successful following this, I believe if other government agencies also follow the same, probably they'll also be successful. So that's from my side.
Thank you so much, Jasbir. So many sort of nuggets of information, and I think it's so impactful when we have, participants on panels such as these that have practical on-ground experience and can speak to, their actual experiences in developing SEZ. I'm again also very excited about your partnership with AfroExim in creating this $100 million sort of, pot of money for the working capital, and I think that's fantastic and great to hear. Okay.
So one more thing, I would like to again thank AfroExim Bank, because all our 10 projects have been financed by AfroExim. Thank you to them for showing confidence on us. And we're looking at 5 more SEZs, and AfroExim is again working with us.
So it's good to know it's possible, and AfroExim is definitely championing this, and we're also welcoming, IFC that's in there as well, willing to support. So it's good to see that a lot of times, a lot of people say a huge bottleneck is the financing and not really able to attract the right sort of financing. And seeing, multiple SEZs being financed here is really, really encouraging, and we hope to see more of this, in the years to come. Thank you so much again, Jasbir. So as we segue into the inner workings of operating SEZ, I'd like to call on Matthew to delve deeper into this topic. So Matthew, what are the key lessons you've drawn from the development of the Atlantis Green Tech Special Economic Zone that might be relevant to other SEZs in early stages? For example, even such as, for the Nigeria example, with how they're starting and what they need to do in order to ensure they do not make any sort of mistakes. How is setting up a green tech SEZ different from a traditional one? Over to you.
Thank you. And thank you very much for the invitation to be part of this panel. I've really enjoyed listening to all the inputs so far, and indeed lots of great nuggets and useful information. And I sort of feel like a lot of what we can reflect on has kind of been learned the hard way in terms of trying to walk this particular path. So I think special economic zones are, as has been pointed out, a tool for industrialization. So in setting up an economic zone, and particularly a special economic zone, it's really important to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. What particular aspect of a country's industrialization are you targeting? And how are you going to use the economic zone or the specialness of the economic zone to help drive that particular strategy? And I think once you've settled on the fact that your economic zone or special economic zone is the right tool, then you really need to understand what you're going to do to make it special and kind of different from what's happening in the rest of the broader economy. Otherwise, maybe general incentives or other approaches could be a better way or a better approach. And I think sometimes we jump to SEZs when perhaps other ways of approaching an industrialization strategy could be better. So I think that's important. From our perspective, it was very clear from the early days that we were supporting South Africa's rollout of its renewable energy independent power producer program. And we were set up to really supply the components to grow that particular industry, the renewable energy industry, particularly solar and wind, and more recently, storage. I think the second thing that's really important is once you've defined what it is that you want to focus on and drive and support, is to understand what you're going to do to attract and support the growth of that particular industry. And normally it comes in the form of tax incentives or particular grants, as already been mentioned by previous speakers. And it's a way of then using those to attract the industries or the manufacturers that you want to bring into the country and drive a particular sector of your industry. However, I think what's really important is that no amount of grants, no amount of incentives or anything else is going to work if you don't have the basics in place. I would say there's four elements to that. And I mean, Mr. Nakpal's put together some great nuggets there. But the first one I would say is reliable infrastructure. I think your investors want to know that they've got the water, they've got the energy, there's waste management and so forth, that those basics are all taken care of and that it's reliable and secure. The second one is around labor and skills. So it's a critical part of growing your industry. Industrialists coming in to invest want to know that they're going to get support with that. And so providing the support mechanisms to access labor and skills is important. The third is access to markets. So, how are they going to get their product to market, through the logistics and other things? That needs to be carefully thought through. And then fourthly, advice and support around labor laws and taxes and other things like that. So actually helping them land and giving them the advice and guidance that they need in doing so. So I would consider those as sort of the four key basics that one needs to put in place and have within the organization. From an Atlantis SEZ perspective, what we've done is that we've taken those basics and we've turned them into a green approach. So, our water, we have a net zero water strategy, or maintaining a positive water balance, a net zero carbon strategy, a net zero waste to landfill, which is around symbiosis and circularity and so forth. And then importantly, a very big focus on driving inclusion. So we work very closely with the surrounding community to drive skills development and create opportunities within the community that come out of investment into the zone. So that inclusion is really critical. So we've really taken what would be a conventional industrial set of services and kind of greened them, if you like. And so that's separate then to who we're targeting on the one hand versus how we run the zone on the other hand. I would just say quickly that I think from our side, some of the things that perhaps we should have paid more attention to, the one was the land, making sure that the land was properly secured and in place, and that all that was completely tied up before starting. I think that was, we kind of maybe rushed ahead a little bit. The second one is to be very clear what you're selling. What is the product that you're offering to a potential investor, and to be very clear on that and how that's going to be delivered through the process of developing the zone. And then thirdly, I would say to work with the community and focus on the spillover benefits. Don't fence yourself off. Engage, look at opportunities, look at ways to draw in your context, if you like, or your community, both through supply chains, but also through things like your security. You need security. Are there opportunities there? Maintenance contracts, catering, any opportunities like that one can actively develop. And I think that adds to the support that you get, which is really critical in the long term as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you specifically for being very candid about your experiences. I think, sometimes it's easy to say what needs to be done and all the great things, but sometimes there are challenges. And sort of one of the things about being a pioneer is that sometimes you will learn the hard way. And we are thankful for you to share your knowledge so that, others that want to kind of, go along after you don't make sort of some of the errors that were made before, but also benefiting from a lot of your experiences. And we look forward to hearing a lot more on the development of Atlantis and all the great work that you're doing there.
Well, we've learned the hard way, that's for sure. So there's lots of mistakes to share.
Thanks for sharing, Matthew. So I'll move on to Dahlia next, because I'm aware that she has to rush off after this, but we really want to hold you just a little bit more to get a little bit more insights before letting you go. So my question to you, Dahlia, would be, how can regional markets and trade policies be leveraged to aggregate demand and build competitive renewable energy sector manufacturing sectors?
Great, thank you. This has been fascinating. I've been enjoying listening to everybody, and I just want to reiterate, IFC is a very a willing partner in all of these conversations. In fact, we are having conversations with many of you for these kinds of SEZ activities across Africa. And as I was saying before, SEZ must start with the right policy environment. And so IFC has engaged with the governments across the region to put in place the policies that would enable SEZs. And I think that's step one so you can mitigate as much as possible some of the pitfalls that Matthew and others have spoken about. So clarity in policy, and not just clarity in policy, but also clarity in how the government is organized to address the needs of an SEZ. So you need to have the de jure and de facto enabling environment, if you will, by government to allow for a successful SEZ. And clarity from what you want to achieve from the SEZ is also important. In many countries, there is this sort of sense of, let's just bring in all of the infrastructure, build it, and they will come. Okay, so in some places that may work, but in most places where you're trying to drive a certain industrial outcome, I think you need to be a little bit more purposeful. Now, the one of the benefits of investing in SEZs and bringing or trying to attract investors to it is that you can then have economies of scale in terms of infrastructure, yes, but also in terms of positive outcomes. So circular economy type questions come to bear in SEZs. And the more you can put in place circular economy so that there's waste management, so that there is a way of looping in all that is needed in the economy, so it is a closed circuit, the better you are in terms of obviously the economic dividends, but also the climate dividends, but also the economic and financial dividends that you're going to be able to achieve. And there are good cases of that. And, Arise has been doing a wonderful job across Africa. Now, in talking about particular how you're going to drive it on from an energy perspective. So putting in place industrial parks where you have solar energy as a key element of your industrial mix, the energy mix in the SEZ is really where we're seeing a lot of the SEZ energy going, and particularly in Nigeria. We have examples where we have invested in solar energy type. We just launched, for example, in Ghana, a solar panel, I think the largest in Africa, solar powered panel energy in an SEZ in Ghana. And there's these kinds of examples that we want to take elsewhere. We're looking at this in Nigeria, or obviously in Gabon. We're looking at it in Congo. We're looking at it across West and Central Africa with many of the people on this call today. So I'm just let me suffice it to say, whether you're looking at OPEX or you're looking at CAPEX or where you're looking at advisory inputs or what it is that you're looking at, we are very keen to have that conversation with you to make sure that the best is to bear in these SEZ environments. Now, I also wanted to say that SEZs are good in terms of what they can achieve for that particular SEZ. But when you start linking up SEZs where you see value chains starting to develop across a region, that is where you even get more power. So it becomes SEZs within SEZs, if you will, or linking up SEZs, that you can really be powerful. So if you have, an SEZ in Congo, Brazzaville focused on a particular output in terms of light manufacturing, let's say, or and another SEZ linked up in a neighboring country, and the two of them can begin to benefit from the policy environment that allows for value chain development, then you're even gaining more positive outcomes. And the only way you can do that is if you lower the costs for all. Lowering the cost for all comes through these kinds of solutions that we're talking about, energy in particular, where you create the space for the economies of scale to enable those kinds of linkages. And that's the thinking that hopefully we as IFC can help bring to the conversations as investors are looking at where they want to situate their businesses. Happy to, I can stay a little bit longer, but happy to see if there are any questions as well.
Thank you so much, Talia. And I think, your comments are just, extremely impactful. talking about linking up and almost creating SEZs within SEZs and those adjacent, industries that come out of, co-locating the right sort of players together within a zone. I think a lot of magic can happen there, but you're right in, the conditions have to be right, the policies have to be right, sort of the stars have to be aligned. And it is a lot of work to ensure that all that it works, from the government side, financing side, private sector, the developers, all need to come together.
There's many parties in this. Exactly. There's many parties to this party, if you will. It's not just the investors.
Yes, and everybody has to be aligned and have that sort of clarity of vision and what the SDG is supposed to achieve, on the national level and also obviously the private sector level. So absolutely fantastic response. Thank you so much for that.
So before Dalia leaves, I wanted to raise one point, because both AfriExim and IFC, they're powerful institutions which can bring a lot of change. And here their requirement is there. For example, now when you talk about renewable energy, as you said, there are two kinds. One is like, for example, you put solar power panels to generate electricity, and then that is more on generating renewable energy. Second is manufacturing of panels. Okay, so or EV bikes. So what is happening? If you look at the size and scale of the countries, if somebody wants to put a viable project to make such for example electric panels or EV bikes, the size of the country is not big enough, or the buying capacity or the spending capacity of people are not big enough uh, to sustain one plant. There you need to capture the regional market. So it means what you produce, you should be able to sell in the regional market. But unfortunately, I'll give again a personal experience where we have set up one of the state of art, textile facility, and we are not able to sell the garments from Benin to Nigeria. Whereas we are exporting to US to TCP, we are exporting to US Polo Association, we are exporting to Kiabi, millions of pieces, but you're not able to sell even one piece to Nigeria. Nigeria has $4 billion market and we're not able to tap it. So similarly, it will happen for renewable energy. If you manufacture here, you're not able to capture the regional market because of the hurdles that are there. So you'll not be able to survive. So here, AfriExim and IFC, they need to bring the governments. So you don't need a SEZ policy of a country, you need a regional SEZ policy. If you want to really make it happen. AFTA is one step, but still that has a lot of gaps. Second part, I will say, those who are manufacturing, say, panels in China or India, they're getting first capital subsidy, then they are getting export subsidy, then they are under invoicing, because of which whatever the duty they are not paying. As a result, you turn out, if you want to manufacture in Africa, you're expensive than them. Okay, so how do you compete with your competitors? Okay, now only if there's a government to government, tie up where, the governments are ready to, open the borders so that a company can capture the regional market, then only probably the manufacturing facilities will come in Africa. Otherwise, they will lose. So I wanted to raise before Khalifa goes, because it's something which only AFC and IFC and AfriExim can manage. It's not within the control of the private parties. Thank you.
Thank you,
Happy to come in if you want, Lulad. Exactly, spot on. I have a number of thoughts. First thought, let me just say that don't underestimate the power of the private sector, especially when the views of the private sector are singular, if you will, or even if they're not singular, but if they're disparate, those voices can be very loud when channeled in the right way. And oftentimes IFC does try to do that because we are working with the private sector, but we also engage with government. So those voices, then those views that you just expressed are very important ones that we often express. And it aligns with what I was trying to address before. If you really do want to create cross-border trade and cross-border value chains, then you need to be able to cross borders with your goods, with your services, with the power. And so that is some of the conversations that we engage in government. And that's part of the policy environment that I was talking about, that it needs to be enabling and not inhibiting in order to be able to capture those opportunities, or else they become challenges, right? For me, I started by saying, how do you turn a challenge into an opportunity? When it becomes a challenge, that means you're leaving an opportunity on the table. And those are the kinds of conversations that we need to continuously be having with governments, with private sector, etc. I hear you 100%. So, why should you be producing in Benin, a relatively small market, exporting to large markets when you can't engage in trade with your neighbors? And those are the kinds of barriers that we need to bring down once and for all. And they're going to be particularly strong when you talk about energy, right? Because energy, we also would like it to flow cross border so that it can, and there are, by the way, elements where this is working and elements where it's not working, places where it's not working. And we need to, and even within country where it's not working, Nigeria is a huge country and it doesn't often work in Nigeria. So this is also an issue that needs to be addressed within countries and transnationally as well. And definitely IFC it's something that we put a lot of thought and energy and effort into, and we want to continue having that conversation with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dalia. Mr. Alfaro, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to add my voice to what Dalia said and response to Jasbir. So we as a Flexi Bank, our primary driver, strategic arrowhead, is to promote intra-African trade and to implement or operationalize the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. And what we've done is we've established a department, okay, that does specifically trade facilitation and engagements with the African Union. So this is done at various levels. So, for example, we have an Flexi Bank member of staff who actually sits with the AACF State Secretariat in Ghana. And the primary reason why we have a dedicated staff sitting in Ghana is to address this particular issue that Jasper has mentioned, to see how best we can have this trade facilitation and harmonization so that the flow of trade can increase. So it's an ongoing conversation. We are having continuous conversations with regional economic communities, with the African Union. What I'm happy to report is that these conversations are ongoing. We're aware of these challenges. We're making progress. It might not happen today or tomorrow, but definitely it's something that's got our attention, because we too, in order for us to make our special economic zones bankable, it's in our interest to bring down some of these barriers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alfayo. And I think this is fantastic. This is just the sort of engagement that we were hoping to have when we put this webinar together. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. And again, thank you so much, Dalia. Whenever you do, feel free to drop off while we continue with the webinar. So we've been talking about Africa a lot. And I think it'd be now nice to look and explore from a different regional experience on green economic zones. So Professor Prowanto, could you share some insights on the experience of eco-industrial park rollouts in Indonesia? How can lessons from Indonesia be applicable for other countries looking to develop SEZs to support green manufacturing? Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, at the moment that energy demand in Indonesia increased by 80%, while electricity demand triples between 2015 and 2030, and that the fossil fuel account for around 80% of the country's electricity generation, while coal holding about 60% share. So clean energy contribution is also growing, and Indonesia consistent renewable energy development over the year. And at the moment, currently, the total share of all renewable energy sources, including geothermal, bioenergy, solar, wind, hydro, and others, is just around 15%. And the energy efficiency policies and also renewable energy development that is part of the policy, that the NDC commitment that renewable energy mix in power generation uh, by 2020 is around 23%. So Indonesia's plan for expanded development of clean energy sources under the Just Energy Transition Partnership that the government aims to reach at least 34% renewable in the power mix by 2030. This is an increase from the previous government policies. And then by 2050, at least 31% were intended to come from the modern renewable energy sources. The IRENA estimates that the transition will require US 60 billion in investment per year. Indonesia also at the moment participates in the Global Eco-Industrial Park Program developed by UNIDO with the goal of developing industrial park into eco-industrial parks. There are 4 pillars that are strengthening, namely park management, environmental performance, social performance, and also economic performance. Energy is part of improvement on environmental performance to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, including the implementation of management energy, efficiency energy, and renewable energy development. That is that the 4 pillars. Firstly is strengthening the management performance by park management. And then also how to increase the environmental performance, including environmental management and monitoring, energy management, water management, waste and material use, and also natural environment and climate resilience. In the social performance, including social management and monitoring, social infrastructure, community outreach and dialogue. And the economic performance, this is focusing on employment generation, local business, and small medium enterprise promotion, and economic value creation. In the part of energy efficiency and renewable energy, an eco-industrial park support resident firms to improve the energy efficiency and renewable energy of industrial processes and also buildings. The carbon footprint, greenhouse gas emission with reduction targets, and also develop strategies to avoid a minimum greenhouse gases emission through extended energy efficiency measures and develop energy efficiency. So, for example, the installation of renewable energy. This is the Batamindo Industrial Parks install a pilot solar PV 472 kilowatt peak on the powerhouse rooftop, producing around 621 megawatt hour per year of renewable energy. So this is saving gas and oil for electricity production. The solar PV plant also save and reduce around 391 tons of CO2 emission per year. So this is the part of implementation and eco-industrial park, and also how to develop the symbiosis industry around the firms in the eco-industrial parks, and at the moment also the development of a circular economy by utilizing the waste as a raw material to develop a new product, yeah, by replace and also waste to product, some of which also utilize to the other enterprise, not in the eco-industrial park, such as utilized as material alternative and also fuel alternative. So the program we developed in this country, in Indonesia, to develop firstly is how to make from industrial park to become eco-industrial park, and also the principle of eco-industrial park, the four pillars: park management, environmental management, social performance, and also economic performance. That is how to build the new eco-industrial park based on the principle of green industry. Yeah, some of industry in the industrial park also at the moment adopt of industrial green industrial standard that is also developed in Indonesia.
Thank you very much for your insights. And I think there's one thing we're talking about, SEZs and then green economic zones. And then I think the next level in which, Indonesia is working on it is the eco-industrial parks, which ideally is the standard that we all want to sort of to grow towards along this journey. So I will now move on to Dr. Lazarus Angbanzo. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. As I mentioned earlier, talking about the development of Evergreen City. And as we mentioned earlier, InfraCorp is the appointed lead arranger and developer of Nigeria's first green industrial zone, Evergreen City. What are the key considerations for financially structuring Project Evergreen? And what role do you see for public-private partnerships and development financing through these early stages? Over to you, Dr. Angbanzo.
Thanks again, Lolade. For those of you that don't know what InfraCorp is, this is the Infrastructure Corporation of Nigeria, a government-backed infrastructure financing and development vehicle that is supported and backed by the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund, and the Africa Finance Corporation. InfraCorp was started in 2022, and the whole idea behind it is to be the bridge between the public funding of infrastructure projects and the long-term patient capital requirements of infrastructure in Nigeria, covering all of the main verticals of infrastructure, roads, and transport logistics, energy, with a big focus on energy transition, renewable energy, and all of the midstream, downstream infrastructure to enable both mitigation as well as adaptation of energy transition technologies. And of course, you've got social infrastructure, you've got ICT as well. InfraCorp was appointed in May as the lead developer and the lead arranger for the Evergreen City, which is a special economic zone dedicated to renewable energy equipment manufacturing. Now, Nigeria is not new in terms of investing in special economic zones, special industrial zones. There's quite a few that are active and operational, but there's something different about Evergreen City. Evergreen City really brings in two goals that the government wants to achieve. Number one is to provide a local supply chain backbone for the infrastructure development that is going to be, it's critical to the overall government development program here. Obviously, infrastructure is the biggest need, probably the biggest infrastructure market on the continent right now is in Nigeria, with an estimated over $100 billion worth of infrastructure that is needed on an annual basis for the next 20 to 30 years. So to be able to actually develop that and to invest in it in a sustainable way, what government really wants to do is to create a local supply chain backbone that allows, for the investments to actually be sustainable. So that's number one. Number two, the country also has a very, very strong energy transition program and net zero ambitions. And the idea, therefore, is to kind of accelerate the development of energy transition and renewable energy technologies in Nigeria that will support the market locally. First of all, it's a very, very large domestic market, as has been noted by other speakers. And today, it is already probably the largest off-grid market on the continent. And virtually all of the critical equipment, for renewable energy investments are all being imported. And of course, this is not sustainable. And so the idea, therefore, is to selectively and strategically identify segments of the different value chains, whether it's in solar or geothermal or wind, and even waste to power, as well as electrification of industry and transport. All of these technologies are things that we would like to be able to actually localize certain segments of those value chains, all of which are very, very long value chains, none of which are domesticated yet. And we think that this is a journey that will enable that goal to be achieved. And so between these two goals, therefore, you have the acceleration and the support of the critical infrastructure that needs to be developed, and the attainment of the net zero ambitions of the country, all of which are really geared and connected to the top line headline, I guess, aspirations of the country, which is to turn this economy into a $1 trillion economy in the next 5 to 10 years. Big ambition, obviously, and starting from a very low base on both counts in terms of the quantum of infrastructure that is needed, and as well as, really making the sort of transformational investments in the underlying value chain, in country to enable additional investments to be made. This facility is going to be on the land has been identified. It's on a 14,000 hectares piece of land. It's located in the central part of the country, which is really in the region where you have the energy minerals of the country, things like lithium, tin, cobalt, and a lot of different energy minerals that are based here. So it is very, very strategically located to kind of leverage that proximity. Now, obviously, our approach, we're very, very early in this journey, and in terms of how we're sequencing the activities here, we've been talking to quite a number of the global OEMs, who are already active in Nigeria in one form or the other of the energy industry, largely speaking, to sort of understand what their supply chains are, and where could a special economic zone in Nigeria, with all of the proper incentives and the proper investments done, where could that actually, which segments will offer them the most competitive in terms of cost of production, in the Evergreen City. So that is a conversation we're having with OEMs from different parts of the world, from China, from Europe, from the United States, and also some African countries, where, we've got some leading equipment manufacturing capabilities. Again, trying to sort of understand, first of all, what the scope could be for them and what their requirements will be. And then, of course, we're having conversations with the private sector investors This is going to be a PPP agreement and structure. Government is providing some support, quite a bit of support in order to de-risk this, not just in terms of the development of the basic infrastructure that is needed, but also in terms of the fiscal incentives, the economic incentives that will actually create the sort of balance and competitiveness, relative to other similar economic zones in Nigeria as well as around the world. So those conversations are going on with a number of the DFIs that I see noted in this webinar. We are also talking to offtake industries as well, in terms of who are going to be buying this stuff, and who is going to be leveraging some of the solutions that are going to be produced here, just to have a better understanding and input for the planning and the sequencing of the activities here. Obviously, this has to be, by definition, a hybrid in terms of the industrial piece, the commercial piece, and the residential piece. 14,000 hectares of land is a very, very large piece of land. And we're sequencing this over many, many years, obviously, starting with the very, very basic infrastructure that is needed. And for us, since this is going to be 100% green, we're starting with the investments needed to provide renewable energy almost on a 24/7. We don't think we can achieve that in year 1 or year 2, year 3, but that is the journey, that's the aspiration that we have. So just to bring it to sort of a summary of what the aspiration is, we have benchmarked a number of the eco parks around the world. We like what they've done in terms of the scale. We're probably in the upper end of the size of the different sort of industrial parks that we've seen. But we like that because we think that it aligns very nicely with the market that we have, not just in Nigeria, but in the contiguous, region, as well as just the ambition of the infrastructure gap that needs to be plugged over the next 5 to 10 years. So Lolade, let me stop here and see if there are any follow-up specific questions that I can respond to. But we are very excited about this. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak here. And we look forward to partnering with a number of those that are on this call, learning from the lessons learned already, and seeing if there couldn't be some of the synergies that was talked about between Evergreen City and other hubs, that on the continent, so as to kind of continue to drive the overall inter-Africa trade, inter-Africa industrial development agenda that we all share and hope to really be the backbone for the shared growth and the shared development that we all are talking about here. So thank you very much, Lolade.
Thank you very much, Dr. Angbazo. I think that was, fantastic. And thank you for sharing your insights into Project Evergreen, the aspiration, the plans, and where we hope to get to. I know we don't have too much time left, but we do have some questions in the Q&A that I'd like to jump straight into. And, the first question would be that I'd like to pose to Mr. Cunning and Matthew. So we have a question here from Vuyoroji. It says, what would you say are the possibilities for collaboration between Atlantic SEZ and the newly gazetted Namakwa SEZ in the Northern Cape province?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, for one thing, I know that the Namakwa municipality has reached out to us, and so we are hoping to host them on a visit to the Atlantis Special Economic Zone. And that would be great. I think it would be a great way to start the conversation and to explore and see how we support. There's also, I guess, an agreement or a memorandum of understanding between the province of the Western Cape and the province of the Northern Cape, where the Namakwa SEZ will be located. So, and as part of that agreement, it's linked to green hydrogen and pursuing green hydrogen opportunities jointly, given the Northern Cape, for those of you who don't know, in South Africa is a quite an arid part of the country. It has some of the best solar resources in the world. It also, along the coastline, has excellent wind resources. And so from the perspective of installing large-scale wind and solar to support potentially green hydrogen, it's well placed. There's also a number of other minerals in that area that can be mined and processed through that zone. So please, let's connect. Let's look at how we can cooperate. I think it would be great for both of us. We're not in the green hydrogen producing space, but we certainly are focusing a lot on skills and skills development, and also component manufacturing, so electrolyzers and so forth. So I think the opportunities for sharing. But maybe, if I may, Loladi, is just build on that question and the previous discussion that that Dalia had raised, and also Mr. Angbazo, raised now about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and the role of special economic zones. And one of the challenges, as I see it, with the African Free Continental Trade Agreement is, where do we start and how do we start? How do we open up our borders? Everyone's a little bit nervous about how it's going to work and the competition. And, it's kind of, we all know it's important. We all know that we need more inter-African trade. But maybe one of the places where we could start is to say, look, if we've got SEZs around Africa, maybe we start off by saying, let's make trading between SEZs the first step. I mean, SEZs originally were set up as kind of experiments, and maybe this would be a good place to start, to say, if you've got an SEZ and it gets kind of approved by the African Union and the produce coming out of it is kind of recognized as being with the particular SEZ, maybe that's a place to start with some trading. Just a thought. But I think there's a big role for SEZs in really helping inter-African and continentally trade. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I think, and I really, really like that sort of suggestion. And who knows, maybe it's something that, one of our panelists or even ourselves as African REMI can try and see how we can support, open up borders, but looking at SEZs, because that in turn ensures that those SEZs are sort of a lot more productive, but also slowly, in a gentler way, helping to kind of foster this cross, regional trade. So thank you so much. I'll move on to the next question, which I think will be great for Jasbir to respond to, but obviously any one of our panelists, feel free to come in as well. The question is, regarding stakeholder engagements, the SEZ and regulators relationship is critical. How have you handled this? And are there macro and economic forces that one should be aware of, like waste and solar? So Mr. Jasbir or Matthew, feel free to respond, because it's asking about sort of how you've handled sort of your experiences between the regulators and community engagements.
Okay, I'll give the floor to Matthew. Because
I
have a long list. Because I have a long list.
That's called passing the buck. I'm not sure I completely understand the question. So
I'll give it to you again. It says, regarding stakeholder engagement, the SZ and regulators relationship is critical. So how have you handled this? So maybe we just break it up. So handling the relationship between the SEZ and the regulators, how have you worked together with them to ensure that, there are no bottlenecks, or that you're able to sort of tick the boxes with regards to being able to be successful in carrying business?
Okay. So
sure. That is a tough one. I think the main regulator of the SEZ program in South Africa is our National Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. and they license the SEZs. They issue licenses. Typically, licenses are issued to a province, a provincial government, who then goes ahead and sets up the SEZ and is responsible then for funding the operations of the SEZ. So it's a government entity, and the province is expected to then fund basically the operational costs until it's self-sustaining. The national government then backs the incentives, backs the tax incentive, and backs the grants that are provided to SEZs. And typically the grants are there to build the factory. So if you can offer to a potential investor or tenant to obviously they have access to the incentives. It's a corporate tax incentive, reduced corporate tax rate. And then you can build their factory, the shell. They must put in their own plant and equipment, but you can build the factory and obviously then offer quite competitive lease rates. That's typically, in a sort of a broad brush, the model for South Africa. But the challenge is always, where is the money coming from? So at the moment, the way that the model works is that as an SEZ, as you land a tenant or investor, you do your due diligence, you take that due diligence and you submit it to the national department, who evaluates it and then will provide the grant funding for the factory on the basis of that evaluation. But that fund is allocated a particular amount every year. So if your application sort of comes towards the end of the year, when that allocation has been exhausted, then you've got to wait until the beginning of the next year. So that's one of the challenges that we have at the moment. It's definitely not insurmountable, but it's one of the aspects. The other one is clarity around how the tax incentives work and how they get applied. So, and that's something that the South African Revenue Service then comes in and needs clarity on. So from our perspective, these have been two of the areas where we, and I said at the beginning, be very clear about what the product is that you're offering to investors. And that was one area where we kind of struggled. The big picture was very clear, but we kind of struggled a bit to understand exactly how the mechanisms work and how our tenants could access and unlock these incentives and this funding. I think as we go, it becomes clearer, it becomes easier, but that's the challenge. We rely on a very good and close working relationship with that regulatory authority at a political level, as well as a kind of operational bureaucratic level, if you like. It's definitely a relationship that has to be managed. It's a key one for us, and important.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I mean, it was a tough question, but I think you handled it very well, and thank you for sharing sort of the dynamics between your organization and just working with the regulators and ensuring that there is that great understanding and that you're working closely together. Jasvir, you have your hand up. Over.
Yes, so I'll just add to it. Our style is a little different, but the concept remains that we have to manage the relationship. So first, what we do is, equity. The government has to take, our first condition to enter any country is the government has to take equity in that. So we give between 35 to 40% to the government so that their skin is in the game. One. Second, what we do is we have a single window clearance system which is there. Okay, so that system, we handpick the people from the key departments, and any issues there, through them we take it to the regulatory authority. That's the second part is there. Then third, we have a committee at the top, above the regulatory authority, where we give regular updates on what is the progress on the construction, progress on the investors coming and their processing, and the problems they are facing. So that way we also help them, connect with them. Fourthly, we, our condition when we do a JV, it's a PPP project with the government, is we also handpick people from the presidency. those who have direct connect to the president and his core, who are supposed to be part of the operations and management. So they are sent on a deputation, like, so they are the ones who can bypass everyone and go straight to the president and communicate, or go to the ministers and communicate, okay, this is not going right as far as the zone is concerned. And lastly, whatever success we get, we keep the our share stakeholders in front. So any first export to US, or any awards that we get at the international platform, we ensure that our shareholders, our partners, are with us in celebrating those. So that is how we work with them.
Thank you so much, Jasbir. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for their time. It's now 1 o'clock on the dot, at least on my time. We've come to the end of our webinar. We hope that you have found today's webinar valuable and informative. I definitely know that I have, and I've taken a lot of notes. A special thank you again to our speakers for taking time to share their insights and expertise with us. We thank you all for your participation, all your wonderful questions. We'll endeavor to respond to some of those questions we were unable to answer directly, or we'll have a breakdown of the discussions that we've had today, and perhaps be able to share some of the responses there. And we hope to see you all again at the next edition of this webinar series. Thank you again, and we do hope you have a pleasant day ahead.